Oh, is it actually true that now it can immediately translate with subtitles? So you can actually choose the language
You mean in this?
and in the Zoom, yeah, because I just see now the option add subtitles and then you can choose the language. So that maybe means that it can be translated to Ukrainian automatically. Yeah. Wait, shall we try?
Yeah.
Transcript, captions. Oh yeah. Okay, so now it's transcripting on English for me, but if I would choose, let's say I choose Ukrainian. Okay, let's try now.
And
Yeah,
where
it's translating.
do you see?
Amazing.
Because I can't.
S- So it's below in there's this list: participants, chat, react, share, and then one of it is hide captions or show captions.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And then there you can choose language, and then you can put Ukrainian, and it's immediately simultaneously translating.
Yeah, but from what I see,
Um,
I don't suggest it.
I know.
The
Okay, okay,
translation is bad.
okay. Well, just in case, like maybe it helps a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I
Um,
think I think we can just like we're okay like, just with subtitles. I think like many people like they're better like with reading.
Yeah,
yeah.
but
Okay.
I just mean that the subtitles that Zoom is proposing are not really correct. I mean, they're just like super weird words and
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
translation like is absolutely
yeah.
wrong.
For those who
Um,
are joining us right now, we'll maybe wait one more minute just to let other people join. Yeah, you can grab your coffee, your tea, or your water. And yeah, we were also talking with Bogomir about cameras, that it would be nice also to show yourself if that's okay for you. Otherwise, it's also fine to be without the camera, just to give this um, space for our faces and to kind of feel it more as a group.
Taras is walking. Thanks. Yeah. I think at the beginning we can just to kind of have a feeling of a group. But then of course you can turn off your camera because there will be plenty things happening on the screen. Yeah. Um, okay, cool. So let's say 5 minutes or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. No, I would say one more minute
One.
because
Okay.
in the beginning there will be a little bit of technical information, so it's fine that people are still joining.
Okay. Cool. Meanwhile, I will keep on researching of the new Zoom possibilities. I know that there is this option to together draw and write
Yeah.
notes. Yeah, that's yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we can try that.
yeah. Oh, Taras, you don't have to keep camera on anymore. Focus on the road. Then- yeah. Oh, now we see the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can slowly start again. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining. We also understand that this is maybe not the most suitable time, also for those who are working in the daytime. But, anyways, thank you so much for finding this time to join us. My name is Anna Potemkina. I will host this event, and also here in the room there is Olis Zazulin, with whom we are organizing the whole festival. And just to give you a little bit of context, this conversation is a part of the bigger public program that is going on during the festival. The festival is called Detalizacja, and it's going on both online and offline. So you're very welcome to join other events that you can find on our Instagram. Offline, it's going on in Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine. Yeah, I will just share a little bit about the festival itself, just to give you the idea of it. So this is the fourth time we are organizing the festival, and the last time was in 2021. So it was the before full-scale invasion started, and after it started, we were thinking a lot about actually the role of the festival itself, how it should be now, how it changed the role, and how we also changed ourselves because of what's going on, how we changed as a community, how we changed as electronic scene, and also how our dances changed on the dance floor. That's why for us it's super we are super happy to start the whole festival program with this particular event, because the main focus of this conversation will be actually the dance and our collective movement, and how it can be shaped, how it is shaped, yeah, in the context of crisis, in the context of war. Yeah, and a few more organizational details. You are very welcome to share your thoughts, your comments, and your questions while we are talking in the chat. And after the talk, we will open the space for the conversation with the voices, so you can join, yeah, the talk also. And also, last but not least, this festival is supported by Goethe Institute and House of Europe program. And yeah, super happy and super thankful for you, Bogomir, that you joined us, that you found the time and opportunity. Bogomir is an artist, researcher, and curator focused particularly on this topic of dance and its dimension, like its cultural, political, social dimension. And it's also important that you, Bogomir, have this very strong understanding of Ukrainian context, about which we will also talk today. So yeah, I will suggest to start this talk, and maybe with this question of your background, if you could share the like, where do you come from, because you come from Serbia, also from the context of war, and maybe you can share a little bit how this context shaped your understanding of dance, its urgency, and how actually you started your own research. Yeah.
Yes, first of all, thank you. Also, finding time was not difficult because I'm very happy that I can contribute to the festival. I'm very happy that there are people online to hear this, and I also think it's sort of my responsibility and almost duty to um, yeah, to translate the experiences that I had in my youth and offer them and share them in all kinds of forms and ways. And I think that's very much the reason why I also started this research on dancing. So yes, there were a lot of questions, but yeah, so basically, I think, you know, as a kid, dancing in Yugoslavia or later in Serbia has been always seen as this kind of, you know, something we do all the time. You know, you do it on the weddings, you do it at school, um, dancing was not that difficult, and it was kind of, you know, something you do on a seaside, and you know, you make yourself sometimes silly, but it's also, there was no fear, there was no discomfort with the body in a way, like, and I think maybe that was just different times of like 80s and 90s. I think the times in which we live now are much more, sometimes we feel very judged, and there are a lot of different examples of how we should appear or look like. So naturally, dancing became also harder for a lot of people. But yeah, you know, like you're just kind of doing it because others are doing it. You see it from adults, you see it from your parents. And but then there was a very important moment, and it was the moment that I just felt like I'm not really belonging in my own environment. And that's this kind of strange discomfort that you have on the, when you're turning and becoming teenager. And for me, it was definitely connected to partially my sexuality, but also just not really fitting into this kind of body or norm, which is very much present in Serbia at that time. And especially how the war started, this kind of insisting on extremely masculine body became even more prominent.
Можете мені не зробити?
Oh, oh yeah, okay. So then, I kind of naturally started looking for places where I feel comfortable. And those places, especially as an early teenager, were clubs. At that time, you could go out there was no age limit. So you could go out already at the age of 13, 14, 15. But at the same time, we have a country that is being very well destroyed and divided based on religion, based on different regions. You have Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, later Kosovo. So it's a kind of like a very complex country where the religion was off for a long time, and then suddenly 90s, in a way, you could say the religious division played a very important role in how the war was also unfolding. And that definitely made me feel that the city does not belong to me, but not just me, to many others, because you had this kind of a very extreme nationalist dominant ideology. And on the other side, the values, of course, went totally upside down. Like, education didn't matter. It also, education would not necessarily provide you food and energy sources. So, so the values turned upside down very much. And in order to find a space where we belong, like clubs and night became very important. And particularly during the bombings, so the NATO bombing, like dancing became even more strong and important. And I think what was very important was also this experience of a large protest which were against the war. And they were happening on the streets, but there was no social media and there was no audience for those protests except those people who were really participating. So Serbia was also very divided, and like it's also, I think it's a very different situation because I think Serbia was seen as this aggressive state that was sort of also like pushing the war further and making it last longer. Srebrenica happened, which was a genocide that took place in Bosnia, where around 8,000 people were Muslim men were murdered. So my youth was just suddenly not youth anymore. It just felt extremely serious, extremely complex. And I don't know how somebody at the age of 10 can even process what it means, genocide, or in a way it felt very invasive. And the only way to survive that was to actually find different coping mechanisms and different forms of expression. And dancing was very much part of it. So interesting thing is that the student protest that started on the street eventually resulted in one of the biggest music festivals, which is Exit Festival now, which now at this moment is being attacked by government and leaving the country. So music and resistance were very much in touch with each other. And I think that's because I think first as a young generation, I think we were very lucky that those older ones and before us understood in what way culture and art and music can assist in keeping the youth and keeping certain resistance and resilience alive. And Yes, so I think that the biggest, the fascinating memory from those days for me was really how during the bombings we would basically dance. And, at that time that felt normal or natural or like, of course, that we are doing it. But when I moved to Amsterdam to study in 2004, like I was surprised how just the feeling of dancing with the others did not feel the same anymore. So not just the level of intensity, also the intention, the way how we connect with each other, how we look at each other. And I just started like being curious, like, and asking a question, like, okay, so what was that dance that happened in those times? And like, is it like something that it's a general knowledge that the dance can be used in such a way, or was that special and different in some way? And I just became basically obsessed with trying to catch that dance that is different, or what I call now the dance of urgency. So um, a dance that doesn't necessarily comes from joy, but comes from a very complex set of emotions, from fear, from insecurity, from struggles, from grief, from not being able to be alone, from needing others to feel alive or safe, or and yeah, so that's that's basically the beginning of it. And then since 2004 till up today, I just kept on researching and looking for these dances, and using different tools and methodology to write about them, to speak about them, to film them. Yeah, that's it. So sorry, this was very long, but yeah, it's
No, actually, thank you so much for sharing it, because really it's kind of super important to understand the background, to understand also from which point of view you are talking. Yeah, what is your experience, how it informed your work. And I think it's also super interesting how on this contrast to Amsterdam, yeah, where you moved, how it also maybe uh, showed from a distance what was going on there in Serbia. So maybe, as I understand, this was maybe the turning point where you could realize that actually the dance is political dance, can be coping mechanism, because you had this
yeah.
contrast of the experiences back home and also in Netherlands. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, I just didn't know it differently. For me, like, if you would ask me at the age of 15 if it's political, I would be like, of course it's political. It's like, I would know if I go to certain clubs that in a way it's like a middle finger to certain ideology or certain groups. I knew that the people who go to clubs are also going to certain kinds of protests. So for me, it was very, and it was also very, very kind of natural in a sense that if you're in a protest or if you're on a dance floor, you need to synchronize in certain movement, and normally artistic tools are used, like, the rhythm, the voice, instructions. Also, art scene was totally not existing inside of the galleries and museums, but what was very prominent was that artists were participating in choreographing those protests. So in a way, you could say that all the protests were some kind of large scale participatory performances. And I think to achieve that was very easy because of the history of Yugoslavia, where collective actions and participation was always part of a long history after Second World War, which was this kind of collective of building of roads or repairing of bombed or destroyed infrastructures, or so that kind of agreement was, or like, was not that unusual in a way, because like for example, my mom's memories when she was in her 20s were always how they would, like, after school go and participate in some kind of collective actions that were result in like changing a certain area of a place where she was living, or so. Yeah, what was shocking in Amsterdam was, well, first, how much I felt lost in translation, in a sense that the experience that I had. And I also, I have to say, I mean, I grew up in Belgrade, so I was quite privileged during the war compared to other places like especially Bosnia. So I think that the danger and like the struggle that I had was almost from Serbians themselves, like from people my own kind of nation, because of the values that just got totally messed up, and in a way how city has been taken by rudeness, aggression, thefts, and stuff like that. So yeah, and then well, another interesting thing in Amsterdam was like, like I went to like just few music events in 2004 or two before that, yeah. And you just see the crowd, and there are a lot of people, and there is a music, and there is a spectacle, lighting and everything, but the bodies don't move. So I was very much interested, like, is this like a cultural that the bodies don't like it's the people don't dance, or is it that people don't feel that they need to move or they don't dare to move? So for me, this question of can I actually, by looking at the crowds in a way, sense when the crowd will start moving? And my theory was that, well, at that time, I actually just wanted to show the differences. But later, my theory was that in order for movement to happen, you need some motivation, you need some kind of processes to happen in your mind and in your body, chemical, also sense of thought, like different thinking, in order for body to move. So the dancing crowds are in a way like something that rises at a certain time and it dissolves. And yeah, later we can touch on different points. But for example, 2014 was a very important year, also in Ukraine, but also with like a refugee crisis in Europe. You could really see how the bodies are reacting on social political climate. And sometimes I think people would not be aware that we are reacting on something that happens far away, but in a way we are processing it through the choices we make in how we participate in different rituals or dancing rituals. And I think in this moment it's obvious that these urgencies that felt very far away are not far anymore. They're like coming closer and closer to Western Europe or even states and other countries globally.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing this. I also, like you were talking about the crowd itself, and I remember the video works that you sent to me, and that I also saw on your Instagram page that you very often show the crowd from the point of view as a bird, like a bird view. So it's like very zoom out perspective. And I also know that you are interested in like the crowd. Is the crowd actually, can the crowd be as a one organism kind of, or maybe it can also move like a cell with the molecules? Maybe you can share a little bit of this method of shooting and of this perspective. Yeah.
Yes, so I will just a second. I will share with you. Are you able to see this now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I will just play it while I'm speaking. So there is anyway no sound with this footage, but yeah, I mean the idea started because I noticed these sort of differences between crowds because I was standing on a very high point in 2004 of a football stadium where there was this big festival happening. And I did not notice the individual movements. I just noticed that the pattern of the crowd is different. like there was much more circles, in the sense that the group of people was creating circles and they would stick to themselves. They wouldn't mix, they wouldn't dissolve, it wouldn't feel as one big organism. It would feel as a cluster of different mini groups. And so from there, I started, so maybe actually, yeah, for example, uh, yeah, this is actually the first footage that I did. So I was just interested, like, what are the distances between the bodies, or how the bodies behave and organize differently on a dance floor. And for me, the reason for doing this was also that I wanted to catch that bigger sort of picture, but I also did not want to interrupt the dance floor with a camera, because the project that I did before this one was very much about disappearance of face in contemporary art, and how artists are reacting to surveillance, and also recognizing how discomfortable we are in the presence of camera, because the way the camera is used is not any more innocent, but it's there to kind of explode and take from us. It was also a time of growth of social media, and so this kind of distrust in technology and camera was also for me the reason to not be on the ground. And I really didn't know what I would catch with this camera. So for example, this is interesting footage because this is like a man only party in Amsterdam. It's like obviously quite sort of you could say like sexual, but the distances between bodies are almost there, no, and the bodies are in all different directions, which is very different than, like, for example, let me see, for example, this party. So here, yeah, so this is like, the spaces are much bigger. It's often like divided based on gender or couples. The bodies don't move too much, and so it's like a very different pattern. And then I think the most interesting moment for me was that I thought I'm only interested in filming parties that I like, but then I ended up with this footage, and for the first time, I documented this mosh pit. And what was interesting about it is that you could sense how one person will initiate this kind of action, but also you could see for an hour how people are non-verbally managing something that is very turbulent and maybe aggressive or pushy. And the more the pit was growing, the people would start uniting into two or three in order to manage this environment. So the person that you should focus on is the bald guy in the very middle. I'm not sure if you can all see it very carefully. And this is the point where I also started realizing how important are hand gestures. So how through this sort of movement of hands, we say a lot. We tell different stories. We organize the space. We balance. We negotiate. We make connections. So much happens in these hand gestures. And yeah, so I started becoming interested in, like, what happens when you zoom in, and when you let people tell the story through those hands and dance gestures. I think something also very important to mention is that the dances have different functions. So this is obviously martial and competitive. It's like it's a fight. It's a form of a fight in a way, which is very different than this one, which is more participatory and social, and obviously very cheerful. And there's some kind of rules. People organize in a circle, and the person steps in and performs in the middle or does certain challenges. Or very different than this one, which is clearly erotic. And so there are like all these different functions that dancing have, and what's often missing is when it becomes political, and what's missing is when dance serves a person or a group in times of serious crisis. And for me, was interesting that or wait, sorry. So this is, for example, what happens when you zoom in into individual. So what are the gestures? And also what was interesting is that, we always pay for tickets to watch dance performance on the stage, and then we discuss like what's the meaning, how did we feel about it. We are translating that nonverbal expression and making sense out of it in stories, but we never really look into the dance floor of people to tell the stories of what these people are expressing. And there's like so many stories going on. So, for example, um, oh yeah, this is an interesting one. So, obviously, this is some kind of form of artistic expression. And yeah, once you zoom in into the crowd, like you have all these many different stories. Yeah. So sorry, I was now all over the place, but please take me back on the track. Like, is this still understandable what I'm talking about? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then following that line of gestures, I also started asking the question of, how what's the intention of the move on the dance floor. And I think the more I was moving towards Georgia and very much Ukraine, um, it just became obvious how people are sort of sharing the space, or how gentle they are in their movements and intentions. And the more the environment outside the club was turbulent or experiencing crisis, the more those gestures in the clubs would be nicer and kind. So in a way, clubs would often be some kind of contrast to the daily reality. Um, yeah, I'm just jumping on fast. Yeah, this is obviously particular subculture, which like comes more from dance challenges, hip hop, house, but it has a very interesting dynamics, and it looks very different from a bird eye view as well. Yeah. Um, so yeah. Also, what was very important for me was to find clubs um, where women well, first of all, actually, women feel comfortable dancing alone, because you could travel the world and you could be in Amsterdam and all these European places and cities that are like Western European cities that have all this set of values, and like, but still the clubs could be very uncomfortable and unpleasant. So finding a place where individual can really let themselves fully immerse into music and sound and dance alone is not very easy. So that question of dancing alone in a crowd and feeling fine is something that was very important throughout the research. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's, I think, a really nice, this naming also gives a nice understanding of this zoom in and zoom out, like dancing alone in the crowd. What does it mean? I also wanted to come back a little bit to what you said previously about technical stuff, about like techniques and media, which I think also very much transformed also, yeah, the way we are dancing, the way where we see those dances. And I'm thinking about two things. First, you said that during your life, while you were protesting and dancing in Serbia, there was no media to highlight it. And at the same time, we have a completely opposite experience, for example, in Georgia, where people come out as a crowd, and it is highlighted very much, and it also like somehow changes, yeah, our perception of this dance. And the second thing also about the media and more about social media, I heard from your previous talks that you saw a very big transformation during COVID, connected with dance moving to TikTok, for example, which was also sometimes an instrument for people to protest in some countries. So maybe share a little bit about these two perspectives.
Yeah, So there's a kind of two sides to it, but I guess like for everything. So yeah, I think the protest in Yugoslavia in 90s. First of all, at that time, you could only get space in media if the big corporations or media stations would give it to you. So that would be BBC, CNN. So the narrative was very much, there was no internet. There was no individual opinion didn't matter. It was always like this kind of top-down narrative and presentation of things. So nevertheless, even the protest was not broadcasted. Protesting for us was a way to maintain some kind of set of values, and also I think especially for my generation to keep on going, to decide what you want to become instead of what you have to become, because the environment is just asking that from you. So I think those practices, those artistic interventions and protests really kept us somehow playing in a way, and also like performing, but also actually getting strength to fight, which eventually took Milosevic away from the power. The protest in Georgia, especially the one in front of Bassiani, when people gather in front of parliament, I was not there. I was in Amsterdam, but I received a set of videos from friends and managed to get in touch with journalists who were in Netherlands, Bohana at that time, to publish this by morning. So having that kind of traffic of images and network allowed actually a protest that was very small to become very big, and so that's a very different, and not just become very big, also just a week later in a protest in Berlin, which was anti-right-wing protest, you could see the "We dance together, we fight together," which was a kind of a slogan that was used in Georgia. So you could see how fast in present times we get influenced by images, how we pick up certain ideas, and how the movement spreads in a very non-linear way. Like, it pops up in Georgia and then it's happening somewhere else. And now, for example, with student protest in Serbia, like you could see how for a long time, like the student protests are ongoing for months, but only once this big picture of a collective crowd of from a bird's eye view started virally spreading in social media, the Western media picked up and put it in a press. So, these are the great possibilities of contemporary tools, but I think also by now we also know what feeds the algorithm and how media works, I think. And what happened with TikTok is I have a kind of, I'm double-sided. I think it was fantastic to have online space where individuals in times of COVID isolation, lockdowns could, do a dance and then kind of connect with the others through those dancing trends. But it's also obvious that dancing is something that very easily bumps up the visibility of social media content. For example, so it can be used in a good and in a bad way, in a way. And I think TikTok platform really spread it in times of Corona in Western Europe, thanks to those dancing videos. So now we all know that TikTok is quite problematic, but so in a way, dancing is very seductive usually, and I think very powerful, and it can be navigated in all kinds of directions. So this is where I'm always saying that just because people dance together, it doesn't always mean that we align on certain values. And another interesting thing was also that, like you had dancing rituals in virtual reality, you had them you in video game spaces, and um, it almost becomes that seeing a dancing body, um, it just helps us to cope with tough situations. Yeah, I think that's the kind of the well, historically also dancing was always introduced as, very problematic, seductive, misleading. I think even if we think of a church or government, this idea of dancing in gay clubs like in states was prohibited, so the clubs were closed. It was introduced as spreading of AIDS, or women should not be allowed to dance alone, it was considered a witchcraft. Or so dancing historically has this very double side, like it's employed when it's needed, like after Second World War. Promotion of couples dancing was very important because of the natality going down. So it was a way for creating new families, for promotion of, giving birth, coming together. But then again, dancing alone was always seen as this kind of almost madness, disease. Um, there is an interesting book called Choromania Dance and Disorder. And it speaks very much also about, dancing before the 19th century and after. And I think today, like we take dancing for granted, but what happened in 20th century, particularly through music that came from African American communities, if we think of jazz, soul, rock and roll, hip hop, techno, house, nothing of this came from white population. It was all music that came from resistance, from um, very harsh times of and post-slavery, and later gentrification, and etc. So techno in itself was also born from that. And then, once it gets out of popular, we almost forget the core of it. But if we listen for lyrics, or if we carefully study it, it's always this very complex set of emotions that is through artistic form being translated into something else. Yeah. Um, so dance and pain is something that very much goes together. But I think historically has been pushed or washed, that it becomes something less powerful or less strong. And I think it's also very much this kind of post-colonial idea that those bodies that are like twerking are not elegant as the bodies that are doing ballet. So we all know how ballet is this kind of like a perfect figure, silhouette, high society, but twerking is vulgar, overly sexual, exotic, or primitive. So the terminology around dances is also, and I think dancing is also very much connected to cultural politics, like in the past, to have a French dance being practiced in UK would be impossible. Like, you wouldn't allow certain music style to enter the country. Like even like waltz was considered overly sexual because the bodies were too close to each other. So yeah, this is a kind of endless history of fight, prohibitions. And I think almost what's the most important is watering the power of a dance, because it is threatening to a certain government, it is threatening to a church, it is threatening to a patriarch. So So dancing is something that needs to be controlled and sanitized in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for giving this historical perspective, because really we sometimes just take it for granted and think that like all of those moves that we do are something that we somehow invented, but actually no, it was a huge history of changes and different perceptions. I was
Yes,
also
I just sorry, I just shared this one because like this is in States is that dancing is not allowed in a house because it's respectable house. So dancing is same as dancing, singing, and swearing is equal. You know, even like we often when we think about the States or America or New York, we think about this amazing dancing. But I mean, States just changed the law that like in a lot of places you were not allowed to dance. You had to kind of stick to your chair. And what was interesting with Corona for me is that we can very fast forget how to dance in a crowd and together. So the spaces where we practice dancing is very important. Like even, you know, we can dance at home on our own, but to go in a crowd and dance, this is a social skill. This is something that needs to be rehearsed and trained and practiced. And so yeah, just wanted to share that with you. Yeah.
yeah, thanks. Yeah. I wanted also to come back to this notion of dance as a form of resistance, because this was something that was with me before the full-scale invasion a lot, and also in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when dance was somehow also connected with guilt, but also with letting your body, yeah, letting it go. But at the same time, what I noticed personally, which with each year of the full-scale invasion, is the higher and higher feeling of escapism in the crowds. And actually, I mean, in the crowds which are dancing, which is totally okay, because I mean, the context is like this. But actually, this dancing on the rave was always, I think, between it had this both potentials, political potential and completely escapistic potential. And how do you see in your work this tension between these two poles? Do you actually make a line between them, or do you recognize that it's two sides of one? Um,
Um, yeah, I always say okay. So eventually I came to this term dance of urgency. You know, like it's maybe a dance in resistance, but it's like it's a dance that comes from pain, from this idea. I'm just challenging and going against the idea that dancing is just a joyful experience, like a celebration of life, and like we all just, you know, like especially like in Western Europe, where every Friday after you worked hard, you can go get wasted, dance, maybe have some sex date, and then on Monday go back to work. So this is like very much how dance is employed in this kind of capitalist structure. But for me, was the dance of urgency something that happens in times of personal or collective crisis. It's not that necessary all of us know what it is, but it feels in that moment that that feels right and good. And it can serve as a coping mechanism, as a kind of a way of creating community, empower individual and groups, creating social political movements like LGBTQ movements or female empowerment. But it's not constant. The dance of urgency is requiring a lot of energy. And that means that it can also become very destructive when it's stretched for too long. So for me, dance of urgency is something that starts and it ends, and then it appears somewhere else. Or so and so I think that's the, and of course it you know, you can call it escapism, but it's also particularly what came from research is that for a lot of people it's almost a mental hygiene. It's a way to help them to go through the next week, to to deal with something, to release certain emotions, to maybe grieve in a very dark, noisy space, to it's also a way to alter yourself to become something more than just a vulnerable human. I think when we speak about dancing in clubs or in groups, it's we transform, we become a different persona. We have role playing. We are kind of maybe embracing our different or becoming neutral, gender neutral, or all kinds of things. I think the processes are very complex, and I think it's for a lot of people going out might be just easier way to deal with the reality that is very harsh, and so it has all these different functions. What's very important is what's the aim of it, and that aim doesn't have to be. It will be great if each individual has it, but sometimes the space that is organizing dancing has that vision and in a way guides that through the curation, through the way that the space works or the dance floor works. And I think that was very interesting with filming in Kirillivska at K41. Was interesting that we were filming during the Miasma event, and the aim of that event was not to just dance and have a party. The aim is to almost reconnect with the body or let the body just rest or dissolve or become abstract in order to be able to participate again in a dancing parties or even just in a daily life. So it's like so what I'm trying to say here is that you can have a lot of people dancing and not understanding what's happening, but if you have a set of values around them and some kind of uh, people would call it a safe space, but I would say like almost a house for those dances to happen. That's already enough, and that's what I was lucky in Belgrade is that people who were organizing parties, it's not like they told us all like, oh, this is a dance of urgency and this is like we're planning a social political movement. They let us experience what it means to dance in that kind of environment so that we can reflect and therefore use that to change or improve things or eventually just survive with ourselves. Yeah. So I don't know if that's kind of
Yeah.
clear. Yeah. And I use the term house because it comes from Detroit techno, which was the black community did not have clubs. They would like host parties inside of their houses. So it's like, that's why it comes this whole vocabulary of it's my house, it's Jack house, it's um and I like the term safe space, but I think that these practices in itself, and practicing ultra state of consciousness through repetition of dance moves, or sometimes through consuming different drugs or whatever, it's never fully safe. So yeah, I kind of like to think of it as a house that has certain house rules, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think this term actually somehow points that the space is curated more, by someone, by some organization maybe, and in the terms of it really gives you a space also to feel different emotions, to express them, and slowly coming to your work, which you have done in Kiev together with also Ukrainian colleagues. You have made a short film which we will try to watch today a little bit. And maybe before we watch it, I would also ask you what was very specific for you that you noticed, because for me, for example, as I'm also as an artist, I notice from my perspective that sense of vulnerability of the body itself has changed, especially especially the body of the man, because mostly men are involved now in the military service, though a lot of women also are. But from my perspective, because I have this distance a little bit, and I noticed a lot the man bodies, and somehow it becomes obvious for me that our bodies are really, really super vulnerable in the context that we are experiencing. So yeah, this is something from my perspective. Maybe you can share something from your side, and then slowly we can go either to questions or to watching. We'll decide. Yeah.
Yeah, I also see that we have some questions in the chat, so we can go through all of them. Yeah, I mean, okay, so my first time in Ukraine was in 2014, 15. I was actually in Kharkiv at a festival which was called Plan B, and it was very emotional for me because I ended up hanging with a group of girls, and somewhere at the end of the night I just found out that they were like 14, 15 years old, and but they really gave impression of a very adult, mature person with vision. And so I was totally, that really reminded me so much of my childhood, and like they were like so kind, and we were like going to all these different programs, and that's the first time where I actually saw yeah, I saw people dancing in a club in the city, and I was so amazed by the freedom of movement and different dance gestures, and also how differently everybody danced, which is so different than in Europe, Western Europe, where like in a way you could say that dancing sometimes looks very militant, like especially if you look into like German way of dancing to techno. Um, so and then yeah, so the last time I was in Kiev was last September, and yeah, I was, of course, I ended up like in K41 dancing. It was closing of Summer Garden, and it was extremely emotional and touching for me. But I noticed exactly what you were pointing out, and that's in a public space, vulnerability of men because of mobilizations, and also because of different strategies of how people move. And also it was clear like how important is role of women in society in that public space, also to sometimes protect the men, or but also how in clubs this kind of collective almost female energy comes as a way of care. And it was just so different than anything else that I witnessed recently. And the only connection that I would have is 90s in Belgrade. Important is to mention that there was this moment of Night of Jaguar song from DJ Ronaldo. I don't know, like maybe people know it or not. But when that song started, and I was with my friend, I had for the first time this kind of extremely weird explosion of emotions, crying, goosebumps. And that was pretty much triggered through that song, which when I was a teenager, I used to call it techno ballada. And it was a song that, sort of makes you feel like you want something, you grew up, you're above something, but at the same time, it's very melancholic and touchy, and not very usual in techno music to have such a set of emotions, or like feeling so between joy and sadness in a way. And so of course, after being in the club, I was immediately thinking like, okay, I have to come back, and I have to kind of find a way to also ask people about these sort of the role of dancing. And actually it was very clear to me that it is a dance of urgency. And it was also so interesting how that space, which is like a club, and it has smoke and flashing lights and it's noisy, how it feels comfortable. Even though similar sounds outside of the club could be very triggering and horrific when it comes to sirens or sound of bombs. I was also very much interested how if there are people who actually can't enter the club because of this kind of triggering elements in the music and yeah, then finally in December, thanks to multiple people, but I think particularly thanks to Maja Baklanova and to Jarema Malashuk, I managed to we managed to organize that after Miasma event in K41. We gather a group of people and we basically just ask them different questions around what dancing means to them in this moment. And yeah, that became a short film of half an hour. I mean, there is plenty more of material that was presented that is now presented in exhibition Techno in Switzerland, and also it will be in some other places. And I'm actually trying to get into film festival, which is the reason why it's now a little bit like more protected and hidden. But yeah, it was very interesting to hear people, and I mean, I'm happy to show the film if audience is interested. It's 30 minutes. And it's an Ukrainian, but it's with English subtitles, and then we can maybe speak about it a little bit more, if that sounds, yeah.
Cool, yeah.
How is the audience? Is everybody there still? Yes. Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. So we can, yeah. If you would like, we can show the film. Or what we can also do is to maybe go through questions and then show the film at the end. So what are your thoughts? The question is for audience, but also for Anna, for you. Yeah.
For some reason, I think that we can maybe start with the questions. I just have this
Okay.
feeling that because there are already a few questions and yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then we go through the film. So I can read you the questions so you don't have to
Okay.
by yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
Asa Pavlenko asks, how do roles in dance community and in social change ecosystem intertwine, and their storytellers, disruptors, visionaries, caregivers, builders, healers, etc.
Yeah, I love all these different terms. Yeah. So that's what I was trying to say is, so for example, when Bassiani in Georgia became sort of like, there was this story spreading how this club is amazing. I was very skeptical because, like it came from like sort of a social media platforms for promotion of electronic music. So I thought that I'm trusting it partially, but I need to experience it and then sort of yeah, make my own sort of opinion. So I went to Georgia, and I met there also the co-founder Nadia Oreshvili and also Georgi Kikunishvili, um, and I experienced the whole night and half of a day, and it just felt extremely powerful. And that's the moment where I actually wanted to engage in conversation with the founders of the club. And what was interesting for me is that everything that they taught, or how to manage the space, so the house rules, the values, everything was resonating through me inside of that club. And that's what I mean with sort of the one person can create a space where the group will experience something that is very powerful and unique, and those values that are agreed at the table, at sofa, when it's brainstormed, they can really resonate through people, and that's something that is very important. So what my answer here is that in a way, a storyteller or the caregiver or healer or visioner, like these are the people that you want inside of that sort of space. And that's how I also learned that whatever I do, I kind of approach it from that angle of, is the space I'm creating welcoming, pleasant, when it's not, why is not, and in what way. So like this kind of extraction of certain knowledge and ideas about hosting of these dancing rituals or managing of these dancing rituals or guiding of these dancing rituals is very, very important. And there's a very nice video on YouTube. You can check it out. It's called The First Follower. So it's basically a guy who starts dancing on a music festival, like in a very funny, silly way. And then the person joins him and starts imitating those moves. And after that, the crowd comes and starts imitating their moves. So the video is trying to say that it's the first follower that matters the most, the person that dares to imitate or adapt themselves to that one visionary or one maybe extravagant person, and then the others follow it, and that's how you create a kind of movement. So it's a very nice little kind of video essay on YouTube called First Follower. Yeah. Asia, do you have any? Is this kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And
Okay.
I would like also to think about it maybe uh, deeper. After all, everything I heard today from you, I think that's something I want to compare in the future. How social change is built, and what are the roles for social change in this ecosystem, and how it connects with the ecosystem of dance community.
Yeah, I think also why social political movements that come from dance floor are always very powerful is because they're non-verbally um, communicated. There is also a very strange sense of bonding and empathy. Sometimes when you live a very long party with a group of friends, it feels like as if you survived something that is beyond the words. So I think that bonding and empathy that happens on a dance floor is very, very unique. And I also do think that very often when we use language, particularly English language, there is almost this sense of that the words do not have the same impact anymore because they're overly used, but also that we don't fully trust the language. We trust the experience. So so I think that's the kind of interesting what I learned from particularly from Georgia was that all these big protests that were done in the past, they started from the dance floor to the street. Yeah. Unfortunately, what's happening in Georgia now is yeah, it's not doesn't look good, but it's also very interesting to see to what point the government is threatened by nightclubs, which just confirms that these spaces are seen as very threatening to Georgian dream, which in this case it's very pro-Russian. Yeah. So something that should be just a joyful and funny spaces where some group of people does something is actually on the list as being the most threatening to the system. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for answering. The second question is from Victoria Maranyuk. She asks, was there the same or similar genre of the music in various contexts you recorded? If not, would you think it would somehow influence the behavior of the dancers?
Yes, yes. So of course, originally I was interested in filming only, as I said, parties that I was sort of associated with, or but then very fast I learned that the drum and bass party can create the mosh pit that that unfolded so many new ideas. Of course, like the psytrance music is very different in the way the patterns look on a dance floor, or the mosh pit on heavy metal is very different than on electronic music. And so the reason why I'm also not showing, maybe that's an interesting point. I'm showing the crowds and gestures, but never with the music. And that's because in editing process, when I'm working with Rafael Questron, like who's my partner as well. So once we have the music, we would just not see details. Like the sound would sort of take over the image, and we realize that when the sound is muted, we actually see so much more in the movement And then that was kind of tested with audience as well. So which I think confirms how easily music can pull us, but also blind us or mislead us or seduce us, or on the other side, alter us. So I think, and another thing I mentioned is culture politics around music of, what are the sounds that are what the music industry is allowing to enter the market. Like, for example, Brazilian music, like they have so many different genres and they sell very much a lot of music within Brazil that they don't need American market. But to have a sound that came from favelas into American music was a very long process. So this idea that the music is not just the sound, but it's also culture, it's also a race, it's also ethnicity, it's also politics, is heavily embedded in the way that the sounds are um, um, traveling. Interesting example is to hear the Arab music in electronic music in Netherlands. I think it just started happening for the first time with the refugee crisis, like 2014, 15, 16. So that also representation in the music programming started happening just then. So that question of inclusivity and diversity also goes again into body politics and cultural politics, and of course reflects as well in the music genres and sounds that are. Victoria, does that answer your question? Oh, I can't hear Victor. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Victoria is still here, but
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't answer the earlier the question. Okay.
it's okay. We will have a recording of that. So
Okay.
the next question is from Natalia Martinenko. She asks, I have very specific, site-specific question. Could you share some dance or music places or events in Belgrade worth visiting during these days for students' protests? Thank you, Bogomir. And the same is for Tatiana, but about Georgia.
Yeah, well, I think in Georgia, almost every nightclub is related to social political opposition. So, yeah, basically, yeah, okay, let me open my map very fast. I mean, definitely Bassiani, because they have been always actually forefront. And I mean, in a way, they were like always the most brave to kind of move this or propose this as a starting point. But then you have, of course, Test Club, Kiddy, Mosaica. I mean, it's very easy. It's actually once you're in a city, it just kind of starts pulling you. It's just I think that club is very interesting on Sundays. Fridays are always Bassiani. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. But I can also message you this privately on Instagram so that we can focus on some other more serious topics. Anna. Oh yeah, and Belgrade,
Belgrade, yeah.
interesting. Yeah, in Belgrade, the interesting thing is that Exit Music Festival that started as a student protest was very late in embracing student protests, and now is kind of not funded anymore by government. So it's moving apparently to Egypt. But there are places like Drugstore or Dim or 2044. And again, the clubbing scene is very intertwined and connected. I think in a similar way, like in Ukraine. So it's like once you enter one space, you meet already people. It's a sort of it's a kind of extended playground or house for yeah. And what's interesting with student protests is, of course, music is happening on streets. So this idea of sort of claiming of or reclaiming of public space um, is it's quite important. For me, it was very interesting to hear the new generation of students speaking publicly is I'm so surprised because the way that they speak is so not the way how I grew up. And it's so nice to see that sometimes when it seems really sort of like nothing will change, you have this new generation stepping in and they're on their own different. And I don't think that these students necessarily learn this from their parents or television. I don't know where and how they were shaped to be so different, but yet so cheerful and so inspiring and moving. So it's also kind of interesting to think about how, like we always think how we top down have to construct and design something and figuring out, and then you just have like a new generation that starts fresh and rethink and reinvents themselves, and surprises everybody. Yeah. I think that movement is also interesting because it's not just questioning the local government; it's also questioning the world in general. And even if democracy is possible in such a heavily capitalized society, with corporations that are infiltrated in our politics, daily life, wars. So I think the movement in itself, now when it's also translated on other languages, might become some kind of a starting point for a new movement that will spread globally. Yeah. And it was also very much about against exploitation of our land and ground and lithium, which country was offered on a market for lithium extraction to EU and to some other Western companies. So the stand is also, it's much more than what is being told, or translated in English, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Techno Ballad is called Night of Jaguar, Night of Jaguar. And interesting thing, it's often played in Kiev in K41 because I'm now getting videos every time that it's played. And it really does something to body, to mind, to soul. Night of Jaguar, DJ Ronaldo. It's from 90s, and yeah, I think it's something like this. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. We will all check it out. My suggestion is to go maybe to watching the film, and then if there
Yes.
will be still few questions in the end, we can still get back to them. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I also just wanted to share, just a second to share. So on one of my journeys and research, I came in, I found a poster in Sao Paulo in Brazil that says, "When you feel pain, keep on dancing." And that was a big moment for me because I was like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Like, like this moment when you don't feel that you're like mad and isolated in your way of thinking. And for example, when I speak about the topic in Brazilian culture, it's very, very almost natural and normal to connect pain and dancing and movement, and particularly because of racism, as also colonial history, and this kind of also attempt to whiten the population by prohibition of rituals and promoting mixing of white and black people. So these strategies of resistance were heavily integrated in the music and rituals, and so even like capoeira or favela funk or all this music came from that angle. Yeah. So maybe Anna, then you can share the video, and I would like just to address the crew a little bit. So just to thank everybody. So basically, a film was possible because of the Swiss National Museum, who showed the interest to present the situation and give a stage to stories from Georgia and Ukraine. And then thanks to the Erste Foundation and Equality Movement from Georgia, we managed to get some funding and do it. But then my visit to Ukraine was possible through Insha Osvita and Prague Civil Society Center, and then thanks to Maya Baklanova and Yarema Malashuk, we managed to create mini team, and Nastia and Valentin from K41, who gave us a chance and trust to be able to enter with a camera on certain days. And then, of course, I'm just going to mention Valdemar, Denis, Valery, Victor, Stas, Bogdan, Lisa, Serhii, and Alexander, who spoke in front of camera and about something very heavy and very they show their vulnerable self and share their stories about dancing. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's pretty much that. Okay, cool.
Should we start from the very beginning to the very end, right? Okay.
Yes, let's try. Yeah.